Hi, we are Poppy and Geoff Spencer, relational experts, speakers, and authors here this week with our podcast number 6. And last month we focused on your relationship makeover, where we introduced you to our trademarked communication tool, the emotional clock. And this podcast, our 6th podcast this year, second in the theme of the healthy heart communication. And this one is about your relationship. And we emphasize the suffix in that word, the ship.
Hi, today's podcast, February 7th, in what we call the Heart Month, is chock full of human emotions. We will discuss our emotional clock and how to deal with the discouraged side of the clock. That's the left side, where we experience those really hard emotions like despair, shame and guilt, all fear-based emotions. And we'll share with you how we can manage these emotions and we can sort of right our relationship to maintain balance in our lives. And even more importantly, how we can keep peace in our hearts. And I used to teach this when I was a psychology professor. Our bodies are made up of at least 80% water. So it's really no surprise that many of us consider emotions to be water-based. When we deeply feel these emotions, positive or negative, our bodies elicit a physiological response to those feelings. So while we, of course, have relationships with others, we first have a relationship with ourselves.
And for our purposes here, we are speaking of the relationship we have with ourselves. It is like a ship that navigates calm and stormy waters. So, for example, the word founder means to sink. The Merriam-Webster dictionary reveals this: when a ship founders, it sinks to the bottom of the sea. Founder has a broader figurative sense as well. If your marriage or your career is foundering, it isn't doing well and is therefore headed downward. When we experience powerful negative emotions like despair, 3 o'clock on our emotional clock, our relationship can founder. Likewise, when we feel positive emotion, our relationship will surf happily along a wave that carries it forward.
Yeah, I'm going to check with my sailor husband here. What are some other metaphors that relate in nautical terms to boats?
Oh, I can go on all day long with these sailing metaphors.
Well, I personally like the word anchoring because that fits into our messaging today of finding balance. And I also like the term safe harbor because that's where we offer many people we work with. We give them a non-judgmental and safe place to examine what they're feeling while helping them to keep their fears at bay. So what are the other words?
Well, let me share with you what many people say to me when I take them sailing for the first time when they're not familiar with sailing. When the first big puff of wind comes, those who are not comfortable with being on the water and on a sailboat often ask me with kind of fear-filled, apprehension-filled eyes, their voices filled with alarm. They'll say, "Are we okay? Is it supposed to lean like that and heel over like that?" And then, of course, the next question undoubtedly will come and they'll ask another thing about, and it would take some courage to ask this, is, well, what happens if we get hit by a really big one and we tip over? And I smile and I'll say, well, we get wet. And just like sailing a boat, our relationships in our lives always present puffs to us. And tipping technically is called heeling in nautical terms, when a boat heels over and leans over.
I think that was so cool. The first time I recognized this, I love homonyms and different meanings because as intuitive it sounds, when we tip over or heel, that's H-E-E-L. In nautical terms, we actually pave the way to heal, H-E-A-L. Well, how cool is that? But we always have to take courage when our relationship starts to heal or tip. And we have to immediately dress it and compensate to right it again.
And Poppy, as an experienced lifelong sailor and competitive racer, I have a really good understanding of wind dynamics, puffs of wind, and most importantly, how to adjust the mainsail when a sudden puff of wind hits. There are 3 things you can do when a puff hits. First of all, nothing, which is risky because a large puff can tip a boat over. Or the second thing you can do, you can point the boat slightly into the wind to diminish the strength of the puff. And the third thing, and the best thing to do, is let the mainsail out, maintain a straight course, and then pull the main back in when the puff goes away or softens and the boat gets back to more level and being on its feet again.
Okay, so wait a minute. This is good. I really like this. So let's use those metaphors for our thoughts and feelings in our interactions with others. So when we get a puff of wind, it hits. This is like what, maybe a challenge or disagreement in the relationship.
Right.
And I can do one of three things. I can ignore the issue. And I might think, oh, it's just a little puff and we've tilted a little bit, but it's not a big deal. But two things happen when I ignore it, right? I never learned from it. And more importantly, I never practice what to do when a bigger puff hits, and it will hit.
They always
eventually.
come, don't they?
And that's why I think so many relationships become damaged by other events, out of their control. External forces suddenly disrupt the calm winds of our relationships. You know, it could be as big as a sudden illness, a death in the family, a job loss, a betrayal. A large wind can hit. And if we haven't taken the time to practice with the little winds or the little puffs, we might just capsize. And what did you say earlier? Founder? Yeah.
You know, I'm going to tell a story about this, about tipping over and dealing with it. I
have never tipped over. I'd be afraid, but Geoff was not.
Well, I had a very good friend of mine I used to race with. And one time Joey and I were racing, and we got hit by a very big puff. It was between races at a regatta we were at. Got hit by this large puff, and I, being a good sailor, knew what to do. I let the mainsail out, but the puff had hit so quickly, and Joey was on the lower side of the boat there. The boat did tip over, and my mainsail boom hit the water, and it wasn't able to go out any further. We kind of tripped over it, and we tipped over. Even with our best intentions, planning, preparation, experience, we still tipped over. But I knew what to do. I was very experienced, so I very calmly crawled over the upper side of the boat and crawled out onto the centerboard, the thing that's the lever that lets you kind of pull the boat back up again to an upright position. Now, my friend Joe wasn't as ready. He fell in the water, and he got wet. Okay, so he was, I had to kind of drag him back in the boat, being all soaking wet, but we were okay, and we quickly realized that the boat was fine, we were fine. Just he was a little damp, and I was a little embarrassed by our faux pas out there in the water, and we were okay though, and so we were able to move forward, and we actually, I'm proudly say, won the next race, even though we tipped over.
That's cool. That's cool. No, wait, so tell us again, just in case we don't know the sailing terms. What's the centerboard again? Okay.
The centerboard is an instrument that sticks out from the bottom of the boat. It's like a long weighted surfboard. And that's what lets you go straight and lets you be able to take the boat where you want to go.
Okay. I got it. So without a figurative centerboard in our relationships, in our lives, we will live a life by default, basically letting others and external events have complete control over what we do and how we live.
Right, because if you didn't have a centerboard, you just go wherever the wind would push you.
Wherever the wind takes us. I mean, how scary is that? Whoa. So if capsizing doesn't mean death in our relationships, and we've certainly worked with many couples who have some pretty strong puffs that have threatened to capsize their boat, but their boats didn't sink. You know, working together, having a supportive team, they can usually flip the boat over and make it sail again, which is like a really neat metaphor.
You know, one of the intriguing things, Poppy, about the story I just shared about me and my friend Joey, he didn't know what to do. He knew I taught him enough that he knew how to sail the smaller sail, the jib, the spinnaker, the big downwind, colorful sail, but he didn't know what to do in case of the boat capsizing. I'd never discussed that with him, probably because I felt I was so incredibly great that I couldn't possibly tip it over, which wasn't the case. Okay. But I do know.
You had some humble pie there.
I absolutely had some huge humble pie.
Good.
I know what can happen in these conditions. Joey didn't. In hindsight, I should have shared with Joey what could have happened if we had, by some rare chance, tipped over. So he would have known how to better handle it. I didn't prepare him for this.
And I think that is so key in all of our relationships, that we prepare for. We have plan Bs and plan Cs to do that. And we need to share our concerns, anything that could happen to threaten our well-being. If a mother doesn't share with her husband, the father, the child has poor school performance or has been caught with drugs, or maybe, like a spouse doesn't share the financial status of the relationship and it's threatening to compromise, their physical safety. Or if a spouse doesn't communicate that his or her job is in jeopardy. If you share with the other person what could or might happen, you then have two perspectives, two problem solvers who can seek solutions, and you won't be thrown off guard. You can seek counseling on that as well. We're certainly here to help as relationship experts. We work the same as a seasoned sailor. Basically, we help you stay dry. And if you do get wet, we'll assure you that you'll be okay. We'll help you back in your boat, and I think that's a really neat thing. Now, I want to go back. You said there were 3 things that we should do in a puff. The first one was ignore it, which is like a bad idea.
Thing. Right.
What was the second one?
The second thing to do is, and it's still a bit of a mistake, and a lot of rookie sailors do this, they'll point the boat higher into the wind just to just kind of take some of the steam out of the puff. So when he or she experiences the puff, they actually change the direction of the boat. And if they're in a race, you actually lose ground to other racers around you because you're now wandering a little bit in your boat. It's not going straight anymore. And they've let the wind now determine their course and their actions. They didn't maintain control of what they wanted the boat to be doing and where they wanted it to go.
So if they don't control the boat well, in your example, the rookie sailor, he or she overreacted and they lose their direction. In our relationships, how many times have people gotten angry over a seemingly insignificant event? It's not thought out, it's reactive. And so the relationship then loses ground and we lose track of our focus and our own life course. And it takes courage for a moment, just a moment, to think about how we might respond, right?
Yes,
like
it
a
does.
seasoned sailor would do that.
You discover that you're okay. You get the boat back on its feet.
So you let the mainsail. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Get the boat back on its feet. You let the mainsail out and you maintain a good course. That's the way you're supposed to do it. I recall a time in a race when this happened, and even though the sailor was initially ahead of me, his boat kept losing ground because he was steering all over the place. He wasn't letting his mainsail out. He kept on wandering upwind with those puffs. I passed him as he was still trying to exert so much control over the situation. And if he just worked with the elements in a more effective way, he would have done much better if he just kept the boat flat and let that mainsail out.
I like that. Working with the elements in a more effective way. This totally relates to our communication. So what was the third thing to do? And this is the desirable message, and what you've been talking about is not to overreact. You keep the focus on the boat being straight and slightly adjust the sails. I think you said something like a seasoned sailor would let the mainsail out and maintain a straight course and pull the main back in when the puff goes away or softens. And we want to share, what the role of the mainsail is as it relates to our relationships. So what is that? What's the mainsail in our relationships?
Well, the mainsail is like the primary driver of the boat. That's where most of the power comes, the primary engine. And it is through adjusting the mainsail that you keep the boat level or balanced. If you do not adjust the mainsail, the boat can wander off course and get, again, knocked over and get pushed around.
Okay. So adjusting the mainsail of our relationships, or the core of our relationships, is kind of heart-centered, and it comes through our communication. So would you say that our communication is the heart of, is the rudder of our relationships?
It's the heart. Yeah,
and what steers us, what guides us to make heart-centered decisions is communication adjustments, the mainsail adjustments.
Correct.
Those are the communication adjustments, and they're essential for heart-healthy relationships. And we have to make those adjustments when the puffs of wind appear, and those things that challenge us in our day-to-day experiences. We can even, I'm thinking about it, we can even chronicle our boat metaphors to our emotional clock. For instance, 1 o'clock on our emotional clock is confusion. It's like when our relationship is hit by a small puff. We get a little caught off guard, but it's really not that much of a big deal. We're aware of it and we might identify it, but we might not have learned anything by it because, well, it was just a small little rocking that occurred. But as seasoned sailors, or in our case, ambassadors for really, really effective communication as relational experts, we will constantly adjust the mainsail of our relationships.
So Poppy knows this as she's watched me so many times when we're sailing and racing the boat. I have the mainsail sheet, the rope that's one hand that controls this. And without looking at my hands, my eyes are always out looking in front of the boat or glancing at the occasional sails, but I'm always aware of puffs on the water, or try to be. And they're usually, you can see it's a big dark spot on the water. That would signal an incoming puff. And if I see this big puff coming, I'll usually pop the main sheet, this rope, out of a block that holds it in tight. The cleats, right. Yeah. So I can quickly release that mainsail. If it's still cleated when the big puff hits, I might not be able to get it out quickly and in time, and we have a bigger problem. The boat might get knocked over and we might capsize.
Oh, God. Well, this is like being present, I know when I first sailed with Geoff, it was so exciting. And I was excited that I had a job that I could do, just being present of the dark spots on the water. That was really cool. I could handle. And that was really fun to point him in the direction of those darker things. So when we know in our relationships, though, when we see those dark puffs, when we're aware of that coming, when we know a loved one might be having a job interview, a review at work that may have been challenged, an unscheduled parent-teacher conference, you're suddenly your teacher calls and it's not on the regular rotation. It's like, uh-oh.
Usually not a good thing.
Yeah. Or even a doctor meeting to learn of a diagnosis from something that was unusual. Those are all really scary things. And those are the times that you'd let out the mainsail of your relationship. Both parties will be aware of this. And you do it for yourself, you do it for your loved ones, and you don't make the problems worse by not being prepared or by ignoring the emotions that accompany that, You don't oversteer it. You don't go away from it. You face it gently, just with grace, and be aware of it.
Anxiety is on our emotional clock is a 2 o'clock setting, and that's like a bigger puff that hits you, and it scares us a little bit more. Okay, but we often still don't adjust the sails if we aren't thinking about it, and we really haven't learned anything. So when the next puff hits, a big hit, like a 3 o'clock despair on our emotional clock, now we're in trouble. Now we've hit despair. We've capsized.
Oh, God. So what we should have done at 1 o'clock confusion and 2 o'clock anxiety is addressed and not ignored the issues. 2 o'clock, addresses it. 3 o'clock despair. We've tipped over. We haven't learned, but we can still rescue the situation and salvage the relationship. And oftentimes we need some help. We can right the boat ourselves, or we can get some help. We can get uplifted from another support system.
The ways in which sailors get uplifted when they're capsized is through both experience and resolve. Some people don't have the physical strength or don't have the know-how how to get when they're in the water, or make sure they don't fall in the water, and how to get the boat upright, right side up. You can hail a rescue boat that if you're at a sailing race, they're standing by for such a situation, and they can offer assistance to you as needed, just as we do to couples. The rescue boat may go to the end of the mast and uplift it to right the boat, or just help you get back in the boat or on the centerboard to use that lever to right the boat.
I like this. And as seasoned relationship sailors, and I use little air quotes there, we can offer the best way possible to help you right your relationship. And then we get to the dreaded 4 o'clock on our emotional clock, and that's shame and guilt. And with our ship metaphor, this chronicles the emotions that occur after you've capsized and have allowed things to get this bad. Your boat is filling up with water, and even though you saw those earlier puffs, you hadn't taken them seriously and prepared for them in the appropriate way.
And the next place is 5 o'clock, anger on the emotional clock. That's what follows. You're not only lost the race, you've lost ground, you've embarrassed yourself, lost face. You're really angry at yourself for being just so careless. You get mad at that little voice in your head that says, you should have taken precautions. You should have prepared for this. You should have popped that main sheet out of the cleat. If you'd done that, you'd be okay. You should have dealt with the small puffs and learned how to handle those first. If you'd just done all those things, you'd be okay.
And the worst part of this setting is when we transfer our anger onto someone else in the form of blame. We're truly just angry at ourselves. We can't blame the crew. Basically, we are the captains of our own relationships. Our hand is on the tiller on a small boat, a wheel on a big boat that steers the rudder, which is the heart of our relationships. We're in control of what happens in our own hearts. Heart-healthy communication comes from the rudder. We cannot blame anyone else for our dissatisfaction or unhappiness or even happiness. We're 100% responsible and accountable.
And that brings us, Poppy, to 6 o'clock again on our emotional clock, the fight or flight setting. On a boat on the water, this equates to you and your boat being dragged to the shore. And you have to bail the water out of your boat. And by the way, this has happened to yours truly. We're once again embarrassed to share that this happened to me where my friend Joey aforementioned that we tipped the boat over and we didn't quickly deal with it, and the boat filled up with water, and we had to get dragged to shore. But we've had to bail all this water out, and we shared all these emotions. You take stock of what's happened. You're sitting there on the shore. You examine your boat. You scrutinize it. You think about it. You determine it might be damaged, and you're faced with a choice at this time to either repair it and learn how to better manage your ship and manage the way you do things. Or you may make a big decision that sailing is just not for you.
And if this were transferred to a relationship metaphor, someone might say, I'm taking a break from sailing. I'm taking a break from dating. I'm taking a break from relationships. Or, we've even heard this, which is not music to our ears because it saddens us when people say, I'm never sailing again. I'm never going to be in a relationship ever again.
I'll never let that happen again.
Never let that happen, which is really sad. So we work with people on those trust issues and commitment issues. And, or someone might say, it wasn't the right boat for me. But no matter what, when we go back to our original metaphor of relationship with ourselves, we can always help you sail again. As relationship experts, maybe you want to be on a motorboat or a yacht, but we can help you navigate whatever waters you choose to enjoy so you can get to the right side of the clock on our emotional clock, the encouraged, or the left side, where you be on the encouraged side, where forgiveness and hopefulness, confidence, joy, and love will lift your sails to smooth and delightful sailing.
So if you want us to help you as relationship experts, or after listening to all these great sailing commentaries, you might want some sailing help or coaching or go along for a ride. But either way, contact us at relationalexperts.com.
You know what? And then also leave with us your inquiries, questions, or comments on today's podcast of Your Heart Health. Your relationship on our website, that's relationalexperts.com. We're currently offering a 30-minute free consultation. We'd love to help you. And thanks for listening. And next week on Valentine's Day, we'll talk about how you can keep the feeling of Valentine's Day, that essence, in your centerboard, in your in your rudder.
I'd say the mainsail. Keep that mainsail driving things forward
throughout the year. And here's an idea for Valentine's Day. You can do this, guys and women. Buy a heart-shaped box of chocolate. It doesn't have to be big. Empty the candy, except maybe leave one in there. Either throw it away or eat it, depending on your nutritional lifestyle. And refill the holders with jewelry, love notes, movie tickets, sporting event tickets, car wash coupons, restaurant coupons. You can come up with some of your own.
Yeah, don't let Valentine's Day fill you with dread or fear, guys. It can be an anxiety-ridden day for some of us. Expectations can soar. We always got to do something, right? So be proactive. Pay attention to these little puffs this week. What causes a tiny spike in negative emotion? recognize it, find the cure for it. If you watch the Super Bowl, you might have seen this Mr. Clean ad where he was this great guy, this handsome,
he was so great.
This handsome guy doing all this.
He was like really sexy.
He was a very sexy. It's a new Mr. Clean, very sexy guy. But this is your chance, guys. Be the Mr. Clean. Do those vacuuming, dusting, cleaning dishes, mopping the floor, all those things without being asked. Oh man, oh man, oh man. You too will have become that sexy image of Mr. Clean in your life. And if your loved one feels overwhelmed in some way, try to adjust the mainsail of your relationship to keep the boat flat and keep things sailing smoothly.
And balance. Thank you so much for listening in to today's podcast of your relationship. And we'll see you next week. Valentine's Day, we'll hear from us, and have a great week.
Take care.
Bye.